Here's a novelty, a dry track. The sun is shining, the temperatures are high. Complete contrast from Silverstone. Welcome to Donington. Welcome to qualifying for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. David Addison and Joe Osborne trackside, and qualifying is just moments away, with the format for this being that the two sections, GT3 and GT4, get 10 minutes per driver, and we are going to aggregate the time. So it's the combined time of the car, with the two drivers having taken part over the 10 minutes to which they are allocated. Driver one will go out first, and in most cases that is going to be the AM of the slightly slower driver. It's the full 2.5 mile Grand Prix circuit in use this weekend. The fast lane is open, and that is the reason that at the end of the pit lane is John Ferguson. Well, Joe Osborne, 10 minutes around the Grand Prix circuit at Donington does not give you many laps, does it?
No, and that's why we're seeing John Ferguson waiting at the end of the pit lane. 18 GT3 cars as Dan Luang in that massive BMW follows suit. So there's going to be a lot of jockeying for this position out on this outlap. And your outlap normally is just getting your eye in, but these guys are going to be so fixated getting that bit of space for that 10 minutes of clear, hard laps that hopefully puts them somewhere near the top of the timing screen.
Now, one of the things you need to do in this, of course, is keep out of trouble. Not everybody has been that fortunate already this weekend. For example, Morgan Tilbrook put his McLaren off the road earlier. Bryn Lucas is with Marcus Klassen, his co-driver.
Yeah, I am indeed. I'm currently in the garage where the car would be. It isn't here, as you can see, because it's out there ready to make its way onto the track. But I am here with Marcus Klassen, who was telling me that the car was a bit sketchy, apparently, Morgan said, when it went off track. Let's just have a look at a monitor as well, because we'll try and bring up the footage for you, Marcus. But do you know actually what happened, apart from the wing fell off?
So the mounting points on the rear wing actually failed as we got down to the bottom of Crane and curves. Obviously no aero there into Old Hairpin. It's a high-speed corner, fourth gear. And yeah, unfortunately, there's not much Morgan could do apart from hold tight and do his best to get the car stopped. Unfortunately, at the barrier as well, and we've suffered a fair bit of damage. But you know, the team's done a mega job, and we're straight back out for qualifying. Yeah,
absolutely. There's a monitor here. We're going to try and bring the footage up for you. But before we do, is this a concern? I imagine it would be a concern that the wing fell off. We just showed the footage actually a few moments ago as you were talking, but is it a concern going into this qualifier and tomorrow's race that you don't quite know the reason?
Well, it's far from ideal, for sure. I believe it's the first one that's failed for McLaren in the whole time the 720's been out, so you know, that gives me a bit of hope. You know, it could just be one small problem with the procedure of building that rear wing. And it is what it is. McLaren will investigate it, and I'm not worried now. It's not in my mind. I'm just going to crack on as usual.
Crack on. Good luck. Thanks.
Thank you.
Joe, it might be an obvious question, but what is that wing held on by? We're talking bolts, presumably, here.
Yeah, I thought that. I'd been at McLaren for quite a few years in the development of that car. And I saw it fail, and I went and investigated. It's just a bonding agent. So we see on the Mercedes, the wing pylons, the metal parts connected to the wing, it is just a glue essentially. There's no mechanical part there. And I believe it's the process of making the carbon fibre. It's so hard to get a bolt to go through it that's not going to then make it weaker in that part. But when you see that as a driver, what the rear wing does, it's not just for show, it's nearly a ton of downforce. And when you take that away, it's gone and it's just held by glue. Marcus Clutton saying he's not worried by it. He's putting on a brave poker face. It is the first one we've seen fail ever, really, in British GT in that manner. But it is going to be in the back of your mind.
It's quite a sobering thought, as you say, with all the load that goes through a rear wing, that it's held on, if I say only by glue, I'm being a bit simplistic, but effectively that's what it is. Jules Gounod sounds on the pit wall with Johnny Adam, because they will go out in Q2, and the stream of cars, then John Ferguson at the head of the queue with Darren Lung, Silverstone winner behind him. Then it's going to be Richard Neary in the ABBA Mercedes. That car, the original Mercedes AMG, has been given an extra 15 kilos under a balance of performance change, whereas the newer Mercedes haven't.
Yeah, you can see the differences though. John Ferguson at the front, the new one is a larger sort of shark mouth grille, and the old one has a secondary grille underneath. And I do remember when the Evo AMG came out 3 years ago, the customer teams were really struggling to make it faster than the old one. It was almost more of a marketing update to make it look more like the road car than the performance one. So I'm generally not surprised. I'm a bit surprised it's taken this long for there to be a delta and for them to get 15 kilos. Of course, the ABBA guys are not happy with that. They're saying we've got the same car, why are we being penalised? British GT kind of go, well, if you're not happy, then upgrade to an Evo, and then you can be happy. It's up to you. But when that Evo is 50,000 euros, it's not an easy decision just to bolt it on.
50,000 euros for 15 kilograms, yes, debate. Right, this is Darren Lung's BMW then, and he is on track. He will obviously do Q1, Dan Harper will do Q2, and we are taking the combined times of the car once both drivers have had a go. So we'll be talking about individual qualifying times, but it's going to be the combined time that will determine the car's grid position. Right, let's head back to the pit lane if we can. Jules Gounon, I think, has been the next driver that Bryn Lucas has found.
Yeah, here with Jules Gounon, and he's standing there with a coffee on one of the hottest days ever, looking quite relaxed as your teammate goes out there.
Yeah, well, that's the tradition, I guess, in the UK, a small coffee. Maybe I can drink it with my little finger like this now. But Jan is looking good this weekend, so I hope he can do a good quali. I don't know where we're going to be on the pace, more or less. We have been struggling a little bit with setup, but I have good hope. This weekend, Jan is really on it, so hopefully he can give me a car in the front.
And Donny in the heat is a hot place to be.
Yeah, you know, the tarmac has been resurfaced, so it's really different to last year. There's a lot of grip, so I think the quali is going to be really tight because the track offers so much grip that nearly every car is working, and it also gives a much bigger window for mistake for drivers. So I expect a very tight quali in the AMS quali and in the Pro quali. So let's see how it goes.
Well, you've looked into your crystal ball. We'll find out. Thanks, Jules.
Thank you.
So quite a few cars going slowly to try to get clear track space as they come up towards the hairpin. And Joe, just to go back to that point about the track having been resurfaced, in a sense, we didn't see very much of what it can do at the touring car meeting because it was so wet. But in dry conditions like this, we're expecting things to be much faster, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. In proper cars as well, you're able to get the power down. But even in free practice, we were seeing a second a lap faster than last year's qualifying. So there's a serious amount of grip out there. And you can see the surface. It's such a dark black at the moment, so much tar in the tarmac mix, and that gives you grip. So the braking points are all 5-10 meters later, and they're finding the cars getting into the apex easy. Ferguson coming to the end of his first fly. He's the first guy to set the benchmark for people where they're going to be. I think pole for the AMS is probably going to be a low 26, maybe even a high 25. So let's see what Ferguson throws on the board to get us going. The car looks good. No big slides out the last corner. And as we come across, we've only got 6 minutes, 50 seconds to go. And these qualifying sessions go so quickly. And we see a low 26, like I said. So, yeah, I think a high 25 on for pole position today is going to be somewhere there for this AM session.
Right, so John Ferguson then, a 26.354 on his first flying lap. That stands as the target. Great to watch these cars go down through the Craner curves where they can stretch their legs. Now, this is another very rapid Mercedes, of course, the Alton Park winning car from the 2Cs Motorsports stable. James Cottingham at the wheel of it, the car that he shares with Johnny Adam. Richard Neary has gone second, Darren Lung has gone third. We wait to see what James Cottingham can do because he's done an absolute best in the middle sector. Now, I know it's the first flying lap, so there's not that much to compare it against, but it's looking good. As Lucky Kara now in number 13, the McLaren out of the Race Lab stable, goes to the top of the times, a 1:26.1. But there is time left in the session for people to improve. But James Cottingham on this lap could, possibly should, go quickest.
It looks really tight in this final sector. Coming out of there, these slow speed corners are so easy to lose time by going a little fast, not being able to get on the throttle. 25.4, so he's half a second up on what I thought pole was going to be. Is it going to be enough? He's 7/10 clear of Lucky Kira at the moment, who isn't improving, but Darren Lueng has gone purple in sector 1. That is the strongest sector of the car. That BMW's got so much straight line performance. This last sector, however, is the complete opposite. We've gone through the chicane, about to go into the Melbourne hairpin. You see it dive down the hill. That BMW going all the way down to first gear, trying to use that front engine to get the front in, but then on the exit, the traction isn't so good. You're seeing him lurching around into the last corner. He'll be looking at his lap time delta. Is he on for a good lap? Get it in early. There's a bit more camber. You get it in, get it over the curb, hook it up, release it, and if he's happy, he'll stay to the right-hand side for a short dash to the line.
What was an absolute best is only now a personal best because others behind him are going quicker. Darren Lung's second fastest then. He is 52 thousandths shy of Cottingham. Richard Neary third, and he's 2/10 down on Darren Lung. Now, the Other driver to watch is here. It is the reigning champion, Ian Logie, then another winner at Alton Park, coming out of the Melbourne hairpin. 3 rounds, 3 different winners in GT3, but Loggie's got traffic up the road. He's got that McLaren 88 to factor into the mix as well, hasn't he, which is the car with Alexander West at the wheel. That, by the way, gets a 4-place grid drop for behavioural warning points issued to Alexander West. Ian Logie comes up, breaks the beam, and is 4th fastest. That was a 25.9. Number 78 Lamborghini, the Barwell run car you're looking at now. That's got Sean Balfe at the wheel of it, and this looks good.
Looks really good, doesn't it? And again, the Lambo loves this last sector. Mid-engine car, so it's got so much weight over the rear axle to get that traction down. Gone in a little deep there. He's got to square it off and get it gone. What's he got? He's been on such a strong lap. First time we've seen this Lamborghini really pushing on. He goes pole, just under a 1/10 of a second, 25.332. This is a quick qualifying session.
It is, and that's a good effort, Sean Balfe. It's wrong to say this is the AM session because he's a hugely experienced driver and has achieved lots of success within GT racing and recently in historics, but Sean Balfe then the fastest by 88 thousandths of a second. Dan Harper looks on to see that his car with Darren Lund at the wheel is 3rd. Slowest of the 17 that we've got at the moment is number 24, the Greystone GT McLaren of Andre Borodin, and there is 27, that's the Mark Radcliffe driven McLaren heading down towards the Fogarty S's.
He's on his personal best lap so far, so he'll be looking to try and get that car realistically into the top 4, because he's only 2.5 tenths off it. But the BOP, the balance performance working so tight, it's Cottingham. He's probably trying to get out of his way, but that is unsighted and potentially, as we see Lucky Kera now up to P2. 8 thousandths quicker than Cottingham to split Balfe and Cottingham in that 2nd position. So this qualifying is really livening up the whole session, isn't it?
Great these sessions, because not only are you watching people putting everything on the line in brilliant cars, but they don't have long in which to do it. You know, you've got to deliver, haven't you, straight away, often on relatively cold tyres. So we've got Sean Balfe, the quickest, from Lucky Kera, from James Cottingham, from Darren Lung, Richard Neary 5th, and then Andrew Howard 6th in the Aston Martin, with which Ross Gunn was fastest in free practice 1, and that actually was the quicker of the 2 sessions, certainly in terms of the top time. So Andrew Howard possibly one to watch before the very end, and the very end of Q1 is only 2.5 minutes away.
Yeah, a couple of people I'm surprised by. Logie, who we looked earlier, the car looked good, but he's only in P10, a reigning champion, really struggling. Lucky Kera there on the TV. That, I think you'll lose the track limits there. The track limits are so tight through that chicane. There's an observer physically watching every car going through, and that will get reported potentially, and they'll lose the lap. And you can see him getting now held up by Mark Sansom. He should give this lap up, get a gap, and then go again. Otherwise, he's just going to follow him for another lap that he's potentially already lost on this one. But it is so difficult for these guys to find that space.
But there's only just over a lap time left in the session, isn't there? Because as now Mark Sanson goes fastest on a 1:25.299. A flying lap is a 1:25, and we've got a minute and 42 in the session. Right, the margin now between Mark Sanson and Sean Balfe is 33 thousandths of a second. That's what splits the top 2 cars.
Yeah, and finally we've seen the Lamborghini, come alive. 1st and 2nd, they've been really struggling to get on top of this Evo 2 kit. Speaking with them there, you can see kicking up a bit of the debut, I think, on the side. Jules Gounon, I don't think is going to be a particularly happy man at this moment in time. Ian Logie all the way down in 14th position.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, when you get the combination of the times to see how the pros haul the cars up the order. James Cottingham's lap was a curious one, in as much as he did an absolute best middle sector, but was slower either side of it. Andrew Howard has now gone to the top in the Aston Martin, 1:25.179, 0.120 of a second quicker than anybody else. But there, Mark Sansom looking very good in this session. Relatively inexperienced driver, but he's done a personal best and an absolute best now in the first 2 sectors.
Yeah, and he's catching Kevin Say, who's only 0.3 of a second slower over his best lap, but you can just see that closing up. It's going to be difficult. He should have this in the bag in terms of the gap at the moment is under a 1/10 of a second, so to have nearly 2.5 in the pocket, he should claim it. But is he going to be a bit unsighted by Kevin Say? That last braking point is really, really under the rear wing, isn't he? And he doesn't quite improve as he comes across the line. So he's got one more lap left in him, basically.
Yeah, that last sector has not yet been revealed on the timing screen. So Mark Sanson's lap yet to be confirmed. The flag is imminent, as you can see, 13 seconds on the clock. So we've got improvements coming. That last lap was 25.236, and he did miss out ever so slightly by 37 thousandths. He was slower than his earlier best lap. That's Andrew Howard, the fastest man in the session. He takes the checkered flag, he goes through, and that was no improvement, that lap. In fact, you know what? He just, I think, sneaked a lap out of it before the flag came out, but he's got the message on the radio now, so he's backed out of this lap to bring the car round to the pit lane. So in the net result of all of that, where do we find Ian Logie? Only 9th fastest, yeah, so pressure is on Jules Gounon. And what about John Ferguson, 15th? In number 15, pressure on Raffaele Marciello, and at the very end it is Sean Balfe that goes back to the top on his last lap at 1:24.880. So that is provisional pole.
And nails it, nearly 3/10 clear. After we were talking in hundredths and thousands, Sean Balfe pops it out on lap 6. He's got no reason to be able to do that. The tyre should be peaking lap 3 and 4, so he's obviously just got on top of it, thrown it completely to the wind and sent it. And Sandy Mitchell, the very small statured man you saw walking away there, will be the happiest man at Donington Park. 0.3 of a second to have in the pocket over all these other factory pros should be enough, I think, to call it early and say they will be provisional pole once we combine these two sessions.
Okay, you also saw Warren Hughes standing in the Barwell garage. Others have still yet to take the checkered flag, so we'll see whether there are going to be any shuffles. James Cottingham has this time improved in sector 1 but lost out in the middle. So the bright yellow Mercedes then does an absolute best in the final sector and goes up to 2nd then. So that puts him 2nd by 98 thousandths ahead of Andrew Howard. He's still 2/10 shy of Sean Balfe, but the margin has narrowed slightly. James Cottingham, ever since he came into British GT, has been a real trier, and we know how good he is in historics, but they're so different cars, aren't they? This is, with all the aero, a very different bit of kit.
Yeah, massively. The historic cars that he's been racing are on tyres that are 40 years old in technology, and the car's even older than that, so the thing's always moving around. And these modern GT cars, and the Mercedes really epitomises it. So much downforce, the thing's glued to the floor until it's not, and then it just snaps on you, and you are simply a passenger. What am I surprised at? I'm surprised the top McLaren is P6. We saw them really strong in free practice, but they're only half a second away. I think this might be one of the closest balanced performance sort of qualities we've had this year. It's been really, really good to watch.
So let's have a quick look at the order as we stand after Q1, and it is Sean Balfe the fastest, then by 0.201 of a second from James Cottingham, with Andrew Howard a further 98 thousandths back. 4th, Mark Sanson ahead of Darren Lung. Lucky Kera going well to be 6th ahead of Alexander West, 7th, but remember that car has this 4-place grid drop. That's going to help Ian Logie, Kevin Say, Richard Neary, and then Mark Campbell, who are all next ahead of Morgan Tilbrook. Mark Radcliffe is ahead of Mike Price. John Ferguson a long way back, just ahead then of Mark Smith, and it is Andre Borodin who rounds out the times at the end of Q1. Sean Balfe is the hero of that first 10-minute blast. So there's going to be the driver change, with the faster driver in many cases getting in next. The fast lane is open, so the cars can go to the end of the pit lane and queue ready for this second session. Let's have a quick look at what happened in Q1 then. It was John Ferguson out first ahead of Darren Lung, ahead of Richard Neary, as the first wave of GT3 machinery hit the track. John Ferguson had clear track space, but the lap time never really came to him, and so that car is going to have to rely on Raffaele Marciello to make progress. We had Mark Sanson sitting in traffic, but he was still doing really good lap times, and he hauled 72 Lamborghini up towards the top of the times. McLarens also were looking competitive, but in the end it was the Barwell Lamborghini in the hands of Sean Balfe that outdid this car of Andrew Howard to go to the top. Andrew Howard looked good, but he got 3rd. 2nd fastest was James Cottingham right at the very end, and the quickest car in Q1, 78, Sean Balfe in the Barwell Run Lamborghini, and he goes then to the checkered flag as the fastest from Q1. Right, so cars are back on track. Before we get to Q2, let's catch up then with the man that was fastest in Q1. Bryn Lucas is in conversation with Sean Balfe.
Yeah, I am indeed. 2023, this is the 20th year that the British GT has been under SRO continuous running. You were here at the start of that 20 years ago, Sean, and you're putting an absolute blinder in there qualifying, what, 3/10 up?
Yeah, thank you. You know, credit to Barwell Black Bull Whiskey car. Absolutely minted it in qualifying. Gave me all the confidence. It's all about build, really. Not over blessed with the amount of testing we're doing, so steady steps. A little bit surprised it came together that well, so you know, obviously I'm delighted. I'm a little bit surprised that that was a pole time. That doesn't mean I could have gone faster, that just means that I'm delighted to be on pole for round 3.
Absolutely, very safe hands of Sandy Mitchell. We'll see how he gets on. Cheers, Sean.
Thank you.
So Bryn, I'll tell you, some of us old fogies were here in 1993 for the very first British GT event when it was the National Sports GT Challenge. Right, so Q2 is underway. You take the Q1 driver's time, you add the Q2 driver's time, and it is therefore the combined lap time that is what counts. So you've got Q1 times, Q2 times in isolation. They're very interesting, but it is now the combination of the 2 lap times that we are looking for. And this, Joe, is where a really evenly matched combination is going to be very, very useful, especially if they're quick and evenly matched.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so confident in the Sandy Mitchell-Balfe combo being on overall pole. 2/10 is a big gap. See all that white stuff? That's the stickers off the new tyres. Right. So that's why Americans call them stickers. Yeah. They say what they see, and there's all the stickers shredding off. Ewan Hankey's going to be the first flyer. He could even be compromised quite a lot by guys on their outlap. They got that car up so quickly, the race lab guys, almost too quickly. So it's going to be interesting if he does get compromised. The interesting bit was everyone was going fast at the end of the sessions. Looks like probably track limits there. The MSV tracks have these sensors that if you run too wide on the exit curb, you run over this pressure pad, and there's a camera. It takes a picture and sends it to race control. There's no argument, but that car looks absolutely pinned through there. The AM pole was quicker than the pro pole from last year, easy for me to say. So what we're expecting from here, last year Clutton in the McLaren was on pole with a 25.4. I think we're going to be into the low 23s, if not 22s. This new surface is giving us so much grip, which is obviously then converting into a super fast lap time.
24.1 was the better top time from free practice. As you look at Chris Froggatt in the Sky Tempesta McLaren heading downhill. So the first proper lap time we're going to get out of this, Q2, is that McLaren number 13 of Ewan Hankey, but then we need to factor that in because the car was 6th at the end of Q1. There it is, and he's also found some traffic. Yeah,
like I said, it's so unlucky. These guys are on their prep lap. Ross Gunn and Jules Goon on. They're going slow, they'll be told, but they don't want to give position away. Ewan's in an awful position. Does he get out of this lap or try and finish it? Now he's compromised. Now he's going to get a bad run onto his next lap. Nothing could have gone worse from there. The team could have maybe advised him on his outlap. He needs to actually back off and find that gap that at the moment's there, but everyone's going to go into it. Now the BMW's flashing him. Shows you how quickly your world can unravel in a 10-minute qualifying session.
Right, so Ewan Hankey now tries to lag back to give himself clear track space, but doesn't want to get down for impeding anybody else. So Marcus Clutton is the fastest that we have had in Q2 on a 1:24.104. And that straight away puts the McLaren to the top of the times combined on a 2:49.859.
Yeah, obviously we saw his teammate Morgan Tilbrook near the back, so shows you what the pro can do. But as other pros start to get that lap time in, I think they are going to struggle to be in the top 10, to be honest.
The Nearies will be interesting in all of this as well, because we know that Richard is a quick am, and we know that Sam is always very good, and the likes of Jules Gounon and Dan Harper now have to do the hard yards to help their co-drivers. In Q2, Raffaele Marciello has gone second fastest, and he is 58 thousandths down on Marcus Clutton. So there's what number 15 Mercedes can do straight away.
Yeah, it shows you that sometimes you can have the car set up maybe more for the pro than the AM. John Ferguson will be saying what he wants. Marciello, with all his experience, will be saying this is what the car needs to be. And John, you need to drive the car to this. And there's always a balance between making the car super fast but almost nervous, how a pro would want it, to drivable but slow for an AM. It's a horrible mix of the two.
Right, have a look at the BMW. Dan Harper was doing absolute best in the first sector, and he's gone fastest in Q2, 1:23.887. That's third on aggregate then. So Ross Gunn, taking over from Andrew Howard, has put the Aston Martin on the combined times onto provisional pole position, but that's the car that's quickest in Q2, the BMW from Century Motorsport.
Yeah, and he was very lucky with his space. You saw him how much he'd caught Ewan Hankey on that lap, and then he did an amazing job of getting out of the way of Marcus Clutton in the McLaren, then Ross Gunn in the Aston Martin, and he's actually found himself in a great bit of space. So great driving, but probably also Century on the radio to him, saying, let these two cars go. You've got McLaren behind you in the green Mercedes, keep that gap, and you've probably got a 5 or 6 second gap then, as we see Kirchhoffer coming to the end of his lap. Best sector 1 for him, not a super fast sector 2, so I don't think we're going to see an improvement from him on this lap. But like we were seeing from the AMs, he's still got 4 minutes remaining, should get 3 more time laps, as we see Mitchell behind him. We haven't really seen Mitchell put a lap in at the moment, nearly 4/10 slower than Harper in that BMW. We know he's got that aggregate advantage that Sean Balfe gave him, but he needs to dig a little bit deeper than that to be able to get it up there, which he does exactly on my audio cue. back to pole overall with the combined times, and pole in this session by himself, 100th quicker than Harper. Like I said, the BOP is such a hard matrix for the organisers to get right, but at the moment we are in a sweet spot here. We've got a Lamborghini on pole, from a BMW, from an Aston Martin, from a McLaren, from a Mercedes. There's a lot of variety in that top end, and that's exactly what we want to see come race day tomorrow.
Right, Sandy Mitchell, 12 thousandths quicker than Dan Harper in Q2, and that is Raffaele Marciello having a wild old ride coming out of the Fogarty S's then. So Donington is not somewhere that Raffaele knows that well. You can see he's brought a lot of grass and gravel back onto the racetrack. I'm just trying to think whether he's ever raced here before even, but Raffaele Marciello is going to have to head for the pit lane, so that was looking good initially, that lap, but with 2 personal bests it's all unravelled at the very end, and so that car, well, he's hauled it up to 8th, but it could have been better.
Yeah, so 2 personal sectors, so he was obviously on for a good lap, but he threw 3 sets of dice at the chicane. He cut the left really tight, bounced almost off the tyre bale, then he bounced off the right curb, then he unwound the lock and ran wide on the exit. He was obviously thinking that was his lap for pole, but yeah, the bet didn't really pay off, and the house won there. He's carried on, but the whole bottom part of that Mercedes grille was full of grass. I think the cooling at the bottom part is just for the brake duct, so he might get a lap or 2, but the brake temperatures will skyrocket from there, and then the brake pedal will go long, and he's got no hope of any performance or even potentially stopping.
2 minutes of the session to go. We're about 1 second away from the absolute GT lap record around here, going back to the FIA GT Championship in GT1 days. Not the World Championship, but even at the end of the 90s, long before that, when the Mercedes CLKs came and ruled the roost. And it is now Marvin Kirchhofer fastest from Dan Harper in Q2, but on the aggregate, it is still Sandy Mitchell from Johnny Adam from Ross Gunn. This car then, Dan Harper's BMW, 4th on the combined times as he plunges downhill. There's just about time, isn't there, for one more lap. Right, that's Dan Harper's car, and as he accelerates his way then now up towards Schwartz Curve, he will get to the end of the first sector, and it is an absolute best. Ross Gunn up the road had done an absolute best, but Harper is going even quicker.
Yeah, we've seen those front engine cars love sector 1. Huge amount of downforce in the front engine, just give you so much confidence at that high speed. Car looks nice and planted so far. No big rubber marks. Callum McLeod in front though. Is he going to hold him up? McLeod's best at the moment was 24.7. Harper's 1.1 seconds quicker than that at the moment, so he's going to hold him up. Darren Lewing, his teammate, probably knows that. What he's got, McLeod has given him all his birthday presents at once and has got out of his way. We carry on this lap. It's another purple sector 2 for him. This could be enough for provisional pole in the pro session. Is it enough to give him pole overall the combined?
So Q2 fastest time beckons, but GT3 pole is the question. That's the target. So Dan Harper, part of the junior team at BMW, but then for this season promoted to a fully fledged factory drive. He breaks the beam, and that lap ebbed away in the last sector. It went purple, purple, yellow. He stays 3rd, and the car stays 4th on the combined time. And Darren Lung sort of stares at the screen, waiting for something to flicker, but it's not for changing. That's the lap, and it's not good enough.
Yeah, when you see 2 purples, you know it's going to be a good one. But he lost 0.4 of a second to the purple sector 3. Like I said, the BMW doesn't love sector 3. It's very stop-start. And when you then think he's basically a 10th off pole and he lost 0.4 in the last sector, it really shows you how these cars generate their lap times in completely different ways to each other.
Right, so this is Marvin Kirchhofer, who is 2nd in Q2, 74 thousandths shy of Sandy Mitchell. The car is 5th on the combined times, but then remember, a 4-place grid drop beckons for Alexander West. Checkered flag is out, and the McLaren will be the first one to take it in that Gulf colour scheme. The Sandy Mitchell Lamborghini for the pit lane. Raffaele Marciello has now gone fastest by 49 thousandths, a 1:23.689. So despite his moment, he has regrouped, and he's 9th with John Ferguson on the combined time. Behind this car, Jules Gounon and Ian Logie 8th at the moment on aggregate. Jules Gounon breaks the beam. He lost out in the last sector as well and stays 8th on aggregate.
Yeah, I think that's the bit of the mystery, isn't it? The Logie Gounon performance. We're so used to seeing them at the sharp end, full stop in whatever they're racing, but to see Gounon only 8th, and Marciello, a guy that he races with so much, and they're so close normally, it's like they haven't quite hit the sweet spot on the setup of that 2Cs car, whereas this Ram car, he's obviously done a bit of aero work, full of grass, it's got less drag, I assume, and it's absolutely flying. When you look at that, Jonathan Palmer, I mean, normally invoices for damaging grass. Marciello needs to invoice him for cutting it, I think. He's done a mega job. I'm not sure he's done any stripes, but that is, again, to do that lap on lap 6, it really shows you how much grip is in the tarmac, and the tyres able to hang on that much longer than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I think Jules Gounon was suggesting they haven't quite got the ideal setup, and there's more evidence of that, as you say, because he ends this session 8th. Marciello the fastest then. He breaks the beam that lap, had a personal best down in the middle, an absolute best at the end. The lap was a 23.7, so he was just under a 10th off his own best. Welcome to Donington, Raffaele Marciello. He's going to be well worth watching when he gets into that car for the second stint. Yeah, when you consider the delta there that they're going to be starting P9. This is that one I alluded to, so he took a lot of curve there, bounced him offline. Those blue ones are huge. Look at the whole car bouncing, sparking from the skid blocks on the rear left, and then you can see how much lock he's got on. His hands at 90 degrees. He's trying to unwind the lock because he has a big old moment. Here comes the dirt, the grass, up in the air again, kicking it up. Give you a good illustration of how that aero's working. See the dust being sucked up from the diffuser, bit of gravel, and off he goes. 2 laps later, puts it on pole. Doesn't faze him at all, does it? So that is half of the pole position crew. So Sean Balfe, along with Sandy Mitchell, then on provisional pole position. Sandy second fastest, but on this combined time, it's enough to put the car to the very top. So it is Raffaele Marciello fastest in Q2 from Sandy Mitchell second, Marvin Kirchhofer in third. So this is Q2, and Raffaele Marciello fastest by 49 thousandths ahead of Sandy Mitchell. Marvin Kirchhofer third, Dan Harper from Ross Gunn, then Johnny Adam sixth. Ewan Hankey seventh ahead of Jules Gounon. Marcus Clatten ninth from Will Tregertha, and then Sam Neary 11th. Martin Plowman 12th ahead of Ron Bell, James Kell, Callum McLeod, Ollie Webb, and surprisingly the slowest out of all of that was Chris Froggatt with the Sky Tempesta McLaren. So Sandy Mitchell and Sean Balfe will be on provisional pole on that combined times ahead of Johnny Adam and James Cottingham second, Ross Gunn, Andrew Howard third. Right, so to look at the highlights of Q2, the main highlight of which I think was Raffaele Marciello's rally crossing, but Chris Froggatt was struggling a little bit for pace throughout that 10-minute period. Will Tregertha was hustling along 72, and Dan Harper looked, as you've come to expect from the Northern Irish driver, very racy indeed. So too Marvin Kirchhofer, another absolutely stellar cast that we have in the Intelligent Money British GT Championship this year. Sandy Mitchell, Lamborghini factory driver, with a tiny slide going into Redgate, then ran over the curb. That lost him a little bit of time. Raffaele Marciello, though, having had his grassy moment, the fastest, and that is quickest for Q2. But it's a great result for Barwell Motorsport, because it is pole position then in GT3 for one of the 2 Barwell Lamborghinis, the Barwell team, spearheaded by Mark Lemmer, and he's with Bryn.
Well, Mark, that's exactly how you want this weekend to start, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult place to overtake, so quality is really important at Donington, so very happy with that.
Yeah, and of course the guys need this to get their season back on track after a bit of a wobbly start at Alton Park.
I wouldn't say second at Silverstone was a wobbly start, but no, look, it's a new car. At Alton Park, we weren't on the pace, you know, for numerous reasons, but we have been working so hard behind the scenes with Lamborghini, and we got a break. I mean, the car's been getting better and better in every area every time we've been out, and we've been getting there, but we've had a brake upgrade for this weekend, which is on a circuit where braking is absolutely a pinnacle. Really hats off to Lamborghini to getting us on some decent brakes for the first time this year. New calipers and a brake package that's actually working.
Great stuff. Well, the stopping's good, the starting's pretty good too. Well done.
Absolutely.
Let's have a look at how GT3 then provisionally is now with the combined times. We know that it's that Lamborghini fastest, Sandy Mitchell and Sean Balfe, the 2 drivers, ahead of Johnny Adam and James Cottingham. Ross Gunn and Andrew Howard's Aston Martin third, Dan Harper, Darren Lung fourth. Now 5th in time, but then with a 4-place grid drop, Marvin Kirchhofer and Alexander West, and that's going to help obviously, the likes of you and Hanky, Will Tregertha, Jules Gounon and Raffaele Marciello. Right, so that's GT3 provisionally. They'll be on track, of course, for the warm-up in the morning, and then we go racing tomorrow afternoon. GT4 cars, though, are already on track. And so the first of the GT4 qualifying sessions is underway. Same principle, of course, with the first driver out at the moment, and you combine the times. So, Joe, we're looking at slightly slower cars, but there's no less energy being put into them, and these are cars having to have the next rung around this circuit, and again, the pressure is on in just these 10 minutes.
Yeah, and like we keep saying, this surface is new, it's giving out more grip. It actually affects the GT4 more positive because they've got less aero, they're more mechanically grip dependent. So we're actually going to see a bigger delta gain for these GT4s. Again, the BOP has been so tight here, it's going to be hard to call. We've seen the McLaren be strong all year. This new Artura, properly sorted, properly planted, drivers absolutely loving it. The Ginetta seems to be getting there a little bit quicker. We saw it at Silverstone being really quickly getting towards the front, and that Porsche as well this year, obviously being right at the sharp end. So it's a hard one to call. And with these silver drivers, they've almost got a bit more to prove than the factory guys who've already made it. They're really, really hungry for success, and we're seeing that in the Mustangs as well, who have had some good results, obviously winning at Alton Park in that mixed weather. Let's see what they're like in these hot conditions now.
We'll worry about this in more detail tomorrow, but although the GT3 element of the race will have the extra time for the top three from Silverstone in the pit stops, GT4 won't, because there is an appeal over a penalty from Silverstone, so there won't be the so-called success stops, but there will be, of course, the extra time to be served by the silvers, so that will remain, but not the extra time in the pits for the top three finishers. Right, Will Moore, I think he's going to be the target, isn't he? Because he will do a lap with an absolute best and a personal best, and actually, no, goes second behind Joe Wheeler, misses out by 5,000ths of a second.
It's mental. When you start to work out the actual distance 5,000ths would be, it'd be about 20 centimetres. So you just think, oh, I should have cut that curb a bit more, or maybe I shouldn't have had such a big lunch in this instance. But that is tight. And the Mustang, Will Moore's been on top of that car for a few years now, so should be able to hustle it for another couple of laps. As you see, they're not quite as planted, are they, as the GT3s with that lack of aero I was talking, and that's quite a good example of it, not being quite as planted, the DTO McLaren there, but that does go on to pole position with Rowledge. So even though he ran wide, he's 7.5 tenths clear, so that is the benchmark moved up, and that is over 2 seconds quicker than we saw in this qualifying last year. These lap times are seriously, seriously fast.
And his margin is nearly 0.8 of a second over anybody else. I know we've only had really one flying lap out of most, but that's a good effort by Josh Rowledge, who's come up from the Ginetta Junior ranks then. So DTO, a new team to British GT this year, looking good with that McLaren. Joe Wheeler then from Will Moore. Ian Goff, Alton Park winner, is currently 4th, and we're almost halfway through this first part of GT4 qualifying.
Yeah, with the outlap coming out of your total time, it feels like you're short-changing. By the time you start your first flyer, you're already down at 8.5 minutes, best case scenario. So it is really important that these teams get the car switched on. I think that's probably what DTO have done really well. Those tyres have been in the tyre oven and they've hit the ground running already at perfect temperature. So Josh could just get straight on it. And even now, he's still 7/10 quicker than his nearest rival, which is Jack Brown in the Optimum McLaren. So there's no BOP difference there. It is just purely down to those guys extracting that lap time out of the car super quickly and super efficiently.
Yeah, Jack Brown, of course, was a race winner at Alton Park. Very, very quick in qualifying as well, both Jack Brown and Charles Clark there. And the McLaren then, the car to have at the moment, first and second. This lap for Josh Rowledge, I don't think it's going to be any quicker. He's down in both sectors thus far. So comes up towards the timing line and loses that provisional pole to Freddie Tomlinson, who's done a 32.606 in the Ginetta, 13,000ths quicker than anybody else at the moment. Where does a second take us to? The top 7, all covered by just under a second.
Yeah, really tight. The BOP is showing off, and it's a hard circuit for the balance of performance to be that good because there's so many different types of corners, and sector 1 is almost flat out, only one braking point for turn 1, and then you're all the way up to like 130, 140 miles an hour in a GT4. GT4 car, and then you've got this last sector of getting it stopped. Joe Wheeler getting the car rotated well there, jumping on the throttle, lighting the rear up, but in a positive way, which means the car sort of swings around the front axle, and it means you've got less steering to do, so you can get around the corner in a more efficient manner, really working that car hard. But seeing Freddie Tomlinson going pole in the Ginetta, we haven't seen that Ginetta quite at the sharp end as much as we used to, so they've obviously done a lot of work over the winter, Ginetta, and brought back an updated GT4 car that obviously seems to be working really, really well.
So this is the Freddie Tomlinson entry, bouncing over the curb, coming out of the chicane. This is the car that's fastest by 13/1000ths of a second, and this is another good lap because it's got personal and absolute best sectors already recorded. So is Donington a Ginetta circuit? Well, of course, the paddock is rather full of Ginettas, with 3 one-make championships for Ginetta's products here as well. But Freddie Tomlinson then dives into Goddard's, into that left-hander, and comes onto the Wheatcroft straight now, rides as much of the curb as he's allowed to. He'll break the beam to see if he can go quicker than his previous lap of 32.6, and he does a 32.5, so he's gone faster still.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of an oddity in the timing screens. His last lap isn't his best lap, so I don't know if it would already been deleted for track limits, but his best is a 32.6 and his last was a 32.5, and my simple math knows that 5 is less than 6, so it should be better. But with the track limits, if you do the track limits on that lap, it can be deleted. Yeah. Maybe the stewards have been so on it, they've deleted that before he's even finished it, essentially.
Well, he had a track limit warning, but that was his first one, car 56. That was at turn 4. That much is on the timing screen. But yes, plot thickens for that lap. He's going again, but you're right. The last lap was a 32.5. The best is shown as a 32.6. Anyway, he's still fastest.
Yeah, I think that it's bad wording actually on the timing screen about warning. You don't get a warning in qualifying. As soon as you do a track limits, you lose the lap. It's not like the race where you can get 4 warnings and your 5th you get a drive-through. As soon as you make a mistake on that lap, it's deleted, quite rightly, because obviously you've gained an advantage for that lap. So that's the only thing I can start to think. And turn 4, the old hairpin where we're about to get to, the next time that car turns right, it's so easy just to let the car run wide and keep the speed a bit higher and get greedy essentially and lose that lap.
And yet everybody is gobbling up the curb, going through that Fogarty S's, low curbs, flat curbs for motorbike racing, invite the drivers to push and to see if they can get away with it. And this is the car that is currently second. Then, with the road to himself, Josh Rowley has timed this well, hasn't he? But this lap is not coming to him. The better times from either the car or the set of tyres came early on.
Yeah, we're seeing, if I quickly flick through the top 10, 8 of the top 10 all did their best lap on their second flying lap as he pulls out the bag in the last sector, just to make us both look rather amateur. And he's done it on lap 5 and nearly a 10th clear of Tomlinson. So it does show the timing screen can lie to you a bit. Just because you're not seeing ultimate best, he might only be 1,000ths off in all of those sectors. And then to do an ultimate best obviously resets the yardstick basically on everything. And he's still pushing now, so he's obviously pretty confident he's got a bit more in the bag.
So Josh Rowley then up to the top of the times by 82,000ths of a second. That is how close he was in the DTO Motorsport McLaren that he shares with Aston Miller. These two big rivals from Ginetta Junior Racing a couple of seasons back. There, number 23, then is Josh Miller coming down to the Melbourne hairpin. He's just dropped to 5th behind Joe Wheeler's Ginetta now. But Josh Miller, another very, very rapid young British GT star of the future, coming up towards Goddard's, and he's going to be lucky to squeeze another lap out of this because the checkered flag is imminent. This could be the last lap for him.
Yeah, he's really trying to set a lap up by that. He goes in deep to the corner to square it off. He just gets past by a second. I think there's a bit more luck than judgment in that one. So he has got definitely clear track behind him because everyone else is going to be on an in lap. But what I was just thinking there, Tomlinson losing that lap that we said was a 10th faster, that was the difference between him being on pole or not. And that's where a track limit really hurts you as a driver. It's never really the driver's fault, the track limits. It's always the track's fault for making it easy for us to do it. But in that way, it's really hurt him, hasn't it?
It has, and with those lap times from 1 or 2 drivers shepherding about, the order is at the moment Josh Rowley from Freddie Tomlinson, and then this car third then, Jack Brown at the wheel of it. Now, he was down in Sector 1, but a personal best in Sector 2. The Team Parker Racing Porsche Cayman gets out of the way. Jack Brown then up towards the last corner at Goddard's. He has got to find about half a second to go second, and north of 6/10 to go on to class pole, and the net result is that he stays third as he comes across the line, because that was a better time, 33.067, but not good enough to move up.
Yeah, we've really seen a class act from Rowledge and Tomlinson, haven't we, to be pretty much half a second clear of everyone else. That gives their second driver exactly what we saw in GT3, that advantage. They've got half a second over everyone else that is in this Q4 session for GT4, and that just takes a bit of pressure off that driver, and sometimes that pressure off actually can make a big difference in just being easier. You're not stressed, you're not overthinking things. You just go out and you drive your line, you drive your braking points, and everything just gets into a better flow, which then gets into a better lap time.
So that's Josh Miller taking the checkered flag. He ends up 5th. In the end, the car that was the slowest in that session was 86, the Toro Verde GT Ginetta that James Townsend was behind the wheel of, just behind Ed McDermott in a different Mercedes from the One Motorsports stable. He rolled, can you believe, in testing on Thursday, went off at the old hairpin, went through the gravel, hit the barrier. That caused the car to roll, so the team have borrowed a different Mercedes AMG GT4, built it for the weekend, and fingers crossed no further dramas. Right, so good effort that by Josh Rowledge. He is the fastest by 82 thousandths of a second, and the DTO entry gets set then for Aston Miller to take over going into for GT4 Q2, which is Q4 of the entire session. Already cars making their way down the pit lane because the fast lane is open. So again, you've got this dilemma, haven't you, in a sense, Joe? Do you want to be at the front of the queue and go out first but risk catching up with the back of the pack, or do you go out last? We'll find out what teams do in a moment. Josh Rowledge the quickest then from Freddie Tomlinson and Jack Brown. Joe Wheeler ahead of Josh Miller and Will Moore. More McLarens next, with Ian Goff just being able to outpace the Paddock Motorsport car of Karen Jundu. Then you've got Michael Johnston, Zach Meakin ahead of Harry George, Matt Cowley a long way back from Carl Cavers, Ben Short, Ed McDermott and James Townsend to round out the 16 cars that we have in GT4. So the last one now making its way into the pit lane, and very shortly we'll get the second part of GT4 qualifying underway, but the DTO Motorsport McLaren goes into that 82 thousandths of a second to the good. So cars making their way down to the pit lane, ready to get the final part of qualifying underway. Let's have a quick look though at part 1 of GT4, which began with Ginettas heading out onto the circuit at the head of the queue. Quite a few of the teams being a little bit calmer in their release from the pit lane. The GT3 teams were. The Academy Motorsport Mustangs went blasting out and looked quick early on, but in the end, 6th and 12th was where the Grunt and Go Mustangs ended up. Number 80, the Ginetta in the hands of Joe Wheeler, was looking rapid, but 4th was the ultimate reward for that car. 3rd went the way of Jack Brown in the McLaren. And Freddie Tomlinson's Ginetta, which had yo-yoed its way from the top to second to the top. In the end, second it was, and then this was the fastest car of the lot. Josh Rowledge in number 36, the curb-hopping McLaren, topping the times at the end of GT4 Q1. So we'll get the green light any moment. Before we do, let's hear from our current pole sitter in GT4. Josh Rowledge is with Bryn.
Well, Josh, that was very, very close between yourself and Freddie there. You pulled it out the bag on the very, very last moment, pretty much.
Yeah, for me personally, I didn't quite get the most out of the tyre the first 2 laps, so I actually aborted lap 3, took a breath, and then went for lap 4, and that was good enough for P1.
8/100ths of a second you have as a gap there for Aston to go out and protect, really. What can he do?
I'm sure he will do great. He's a great driver, so we've done half the job, and now he's got to do the rest of the job, but I'm sure he will.
No pressure, well done.
Thank you.
Very nice, polite young man, isn't he? As we see the next GT4s going out, really attacking the exit. So the tyres are brand new. They've got a releasing agent on, which is a little bit slippy. So you want to get that off as quickly as you can. So then you can get into the proper part of the tyre, the rubber, and you can start to get that warmed up a little bit better. So as you get to the end of the flying lap, you're ready to go. As we see Stuart Middleton waiting a little bit longer. The track temperatures will be just starting to tail off the midday sun is obviously the hottest point. There's normally about an hour and a bit's lag behind it as they start to peak and rise up from there. And they'll just be maybe looking, going, you know what, if we wait another couple of minutes, it's only getting cooler, and we might just be able to get a little bit more. As we see, it is 36.1. That was nearly 40 earlier in the day, so it's dropped down, only 10%, but every little helps in all of that. So they'll be trying to get the most out of any sort of performance gain they can find.
Now, some very rapid drivers take to the stage next. Not saying that the drivers we had in Q1 weren't, but you've got some more GT4 star names coming out on track next. That is Aston Miller making his way on track in the car that's currently the fastest. And to make the point again, the time set by the first driver is added to the time that's about to be set by the second driver, and it's that combined time that will determine the GT4 part of the grid. So we'll be talking about what people are doing in the session, but on the timing tower you'll find what the overall combined situation is. So let's go on board then with the Porsche. This is the Team Parker Racing car that comes out of the Melbourne hairpin. It is Dan Vaughan, GT4 champion of seasons past in his Aston Martin days, back racing after a layoff, but he's the man behind the wheel of it, and he's about to start a flying lap, Joe. Yeah,
surprised how close he is to that McLaren in front. I would want double that distance really to think you've maybe got 5 flying laps coming up, and if you're quicker you're going to be catching them. And McLaren got a good exit though, didn't it? And really gone and just see that Stuart Middleton, Ginetta I think leaving, actually no, Esme Hawkey in the other one I believe leaving, so gets it in. What's he got on the exit? Nice and safe. Probably feels like he could have attacked that a bit more in hindsight, so he'll use that now for the rest of the lap, going right, I've got a bit more grip than maybe I thought I do. Easy flat through the cranes, drops away, hold it over to the left, brake just before the one board on the right, roll off the brake, carry the speed, all the curb on the inside, not too much on the outside. We talk about track limits relentlessly, but as a driver you're fixated by it. There's some corners where the track limits aren't policed, and there's some corners where are. You need to know which ones you can, which ones you can't. A little bit wide there through the left kink coming into McLean's. That would compromise his exit now. Again, a track limit sensor there. They'll stay off that green as if it was lava. Up into Coppice, blind entry, can't see it. There should be a bollard on the inside. It's already been removed, so next lap he knows he can attack that curb even more. The only real chance to relax down here coming into the chicane. 2 little brows, you brake on the second one is where this exhibition centre finishes on the left-hand side on the brakes. He's given this lap up almost. He's not really attacking it that much at all. Is he going for another prep lap? If he feels like the tyres aren't ready, you're better to just warm them up and then attack on the next lap rather than go when the car and the tyre isn't ready for it.
The fastest time has been done by the McLaren Artura of Darren Burke, the car that he shares with Harry George. Matt Nicol-Jones' Mustang is second, but we've only got really 4 times as yet, so the session is going to have more relevance once everybody has done a couple of laps, as Dan Vaughan then now turns left out of Goddard's, and the road is looking clear ahead of him. Here we go. So this should be a really good lap coming up now.
Yeah, exactly. So he's just done a lap that's 13 seconds off the pace. So, like I said, he's obviously trying to get that car into a window where he's happy with it. He might have aborted quite early, like I said, at turn 1. He didn't really attack it. To not do the second lap, he's got to have some form of problem. What it is, I don't know. The car looked okay in Q1. Yeah. He hasn't hit anything in Q2. So my fear would be it's an electrical issue and he's got to master the car on and off, turn it off and on and let it reset, but no obvious mechanical issue that I could see from that car anyway.
I was going to say, if it's a problem, why not come in? But if it's electrical and you can do it on the track, then you're wasting less time, aren't you? Because coming in, you lose time, and then you've got an out lap, lose time, and we've only got 5 minutes and change on the clock anleanyway.
Yeah, and the other positive is you get a yellow flag out, so no one can improve in that corner either. So
how cynical.
If you were really looking for marginal gains, that's quite a nice one to get people. But Darren Burke comes across the line in the Enduro car, up to P1, 300ths quicker than the Optimum McLaren. So really seeing this McLaren hustling on. You saw him go the old school into the pit entry to open the corner up, but now we've got these little cones on the green triangle bit. It's harder to do. He almost Scandinavian flicked it in, so it looked dramatic, but I'm not sure that's the best way to get the lap time anymore into turn 1 personally.
Well, it's put him back to the top of the times within the session, and third on aggregate as another one to attack the curbs. Esme Hawkey there rattles the car over the curb up to the exit of the S's. So this at the moment is the car that is 10th in the second part of GT4 qualifying, 8th on the aggregate times. Esme Hawkey back into British racing after a season in Germany, comes up towards Goddard's. There is that rather recalcitrant Porsche, which Dan Vaughan is still seemingly nursing and is 13th. He has got a lap time, but slow, and again, slow over the line. What's going on?
Yeah, I'll pass on that one.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I know everything, but to do 3 slow laps,
yeah.
I literally have no idea. The only thing I'm trying to think is, have they saved a set of new tyres? He's on the Q1 tyres and is just out there to get a lap time, but you'd still push harder than he is. But to not box after 3 laps of an issue, maybe he's lost.
Yeah, I mean, he's 12.8 seconds off the pace. So they're all slow laps, these. Anyway, Stuart Middleton is not slow, we know that. 4th, then he's sideways, going into McLean's in the left hooker, Ginetta. This is the car that is 2nd on aggregate, 4th in Q2 for GT4, going up now towards Coppice Corner. So Stuart Middleton, very, very spectacular driver, much underrated, very, very fast Brit. Good to have him back in the UK after racing in Italy. And he comes then now down towards the Fogarty S's, recovered after his pit lane accident where he was knocked over last year in Italy and he hurt himself, but he flicks the car over the curb through the S's, absolutely straight lines it. This looks good. Looks
really good, doesn't it? He's a hustler. I like a driver that's a hustler. Gives us the body language of the car. That Ginetta's so softly sprung on the front. You can see it pitch all the way down, split a touch on the floor, then when it jumps on the throttle, the rear does the same. The car, when it talks like that to you as a driver, you know exactly what it wants. You can manipulate that weight and really put it on which axle, which corner you need it at any given time. So I think that's why we're seeing a great performance from the Ginettas here so far in qualifying. Right, Stuart Middleton breaks the beam and goes up to 3rd then. News from Bryn in the pits is that the 18 Porsche has a misfire. It started at the end of Q1, so they've got to try and get the 3 laps in for Dan Vaughan. He's done that, so he might now bail. 22 there, Lewis Plato, who we've seen in GT3 machinery in the past. He has now got himself up to 4th in the times, having done an absolute best within the first sector last time around. But the fastest in Q2 for GT4 cars, Charles Clark's McLaren, and it is Aston Miller, who is the fastest overall by 1,000th from Stuart Middleton on aggregate. That is tight, and I think that's what they were joking about in the Ginetta garage there. Freddie Tomlinson looks the spitting image of his dad, doesn't it, Lawrence Tomlinson? So we've had a huge amount of Tomlinson family history racing, especially in Ginetta. So to be 1,000th behind there, be on the blower to Middleton going, if you could just find 2,000, you would be on pole position. Obviously, that's the only thing when it's aggregated, you've got to double the gap to be able to half the deficit, essentially. So that was a pretty bad way of saying how he needs to go faster, but that's what he needs to do. But even if he equalled the time, he still wouldn't get pole because the car that set it first gets the higher grid position. But you're right, he needs to find those 2,000ths to go yet faster still to get himself up on a pole. Number 90, though, is still quickest within this final part of GT4 qualifying that is now less than a lap time away from the checkered flag. So this is Charles Clark. If he wants it, there's another lap on the table for him. He's 27 thousandths up in this session and 3rd on aggregate. Yeah, it's looking good. He's on pole. He just needs that little bit more, doesn't he, to try and get him up to these front 2. The front 2 have really been a class one that he's gone for it track limits wise, and that's really what you kind of would advise people to do. If you know you've got nothing left, then see where the track limits exactly are. It's not always black and white, and he was definitely getting closer to the black part of the track limit there rather than a light grey. Car looks good on board. You can see that big ducting there, which will be blowing cold air into his face to try and cool him down, get the performance out of the driver, tuck the car in, straighten the wheel. Not too wild on the exit. What's he got as he comes across the line? Is it improvement? It's going to be tight, I think, but I don't think he's got any more in the bag by the looks of it. Provisional pole, which is brilliant for him personally, but as a collective P3, I think they would have wanted to be the fastest McLaren from what we've seen so far this year from that pairing in the Optimum team. Yeah, they're just over 1/5 of a second away on aggregate, but he's still going for it. Yeah, really attacking it there. You can see the car moving around, getting it in. Car looks a little understeery to me, so the rear looks planted. It doesn't look like he's got any problems with any oversteer. Just have to put a lot of lock on to get the car into where he wants. So let's look when he turns right. I didn't want to see anyway, but I would expect him to have to put too much on, and that's really working the front tyre in quite a bad way, where you can get to a point after a few laps you can start to damage that tyre wall just purely because it's scrubbing over itself and creates a big vibration. But those DTO guys look pretty happy. They feel quite confident that no one is improving anymore. And on aggregate, 1,000th of a second is the margin, the closest combined qualifying session that we've ever had in British GT. So flag is out. Many cars not actually taking the flag on the track. They're already bailing and coming into the pit lane. If they feel they can't go any quicker, there's no point wasting a lap out of the rubber. They're coming in early. So into
The final corner comes 36 then, with Aston Miller at the wheel of it, but he brings the McLaren into the pit lane, so the celebrations can begin, can't they, for the DTO Motorsport team? And fantastic stuff that from the two of them. Charles Clark, though, the fastest within this final part of GT4 qualifying, and they're celebrating at DTO. Or can they celebrate after 2 hours of racing tomorrow? The fact that it's 1,000th of a second between them does rather underline how competitive GT4 is and what a fight they're going to have on their hands.
Yeah, and we've seen how different the Ginetta and that McLaren generate their lap time. It's going to make a really interesting race for them. The cars come back and they go into a part firme condition, so the teams can't touch them, just in case there's any checks that want to be done. No one can claim. It's actually gone all the way down to part firme now. Checkered flag is out. So great qualifying session. I'm so excited in both classes for the race tomorrow.
It's looking good, isn't it? 2 hours with really a pit stop to come just after the hour mark. You'll find, I think, your slower driver to go first in pretty much every case, because you want your gun driver in for the second stint in case there is a late race safety car, because that's when you can possibly gain ground. So it's going to be another interesting race, that is for sure. So at the end of qualifying, that gives us now a GT4 grid. This is the order on aggregate, with number 36, the Aston Miller, Josh Rowledge, DTO Motorsport, McLaren ahead of Stuart Middleton and Freddie Tomlinson, and Charles Clark and Jack Brown then third. Darren Burke with Harry George for fourth, ahead of Walton Park winners Tom Wrigley and Ian Goff. Seb Hopkins and Josh Miller taking sixth, with Tom Rawlings doing the better time to be seventh. Eighth quickest, Lewis Plato, and then Matt Nicol-Jones, Esme Hawkey to come ahead of Chris Solkel. Eric Evans outpaced Thomas Holland, Michael Broadhurst, then it was Ian Duggan and Dan Vaughan's misfiring Porsche rounding out the order. So at the end of qualifying for the GT4 cars, it is looking pretty good as far as the McLaren and Ginetta teams are concerned, getting themselves to the pointy end, and the battle tomorrow is going to be a very intense one indeed, that is for sure. Not only on track but in the pit lane as well, to make sure that people don't mess up the pit stop time, because you know penalties can come even if you're a fraction of a second under the regulation time. So Q4 got underway with, now we know the background to it, the misfiring Porsche of Dan Vaughan struggling. Looking quick early on was Darren Burke, who would be second in number 17 McLaren to be fourth on aggregate. 22 BMW put Lewis Plato behind the wheel, and he was able to get that car in the session up to fourth and eighth on aggregate. But Stuart Middleton was one of the real stars of that session, taking the Ginetta by the scruff of the neck, flinging it around Donington to go third in the session, second on aggregate. The fastest time was set by Charles Clark's McLaren, but this car of Josh Rowledge and Aston Miller on pole position in GT4 here at Donington. So DTO Motorsport it is that takes pole position, and Bryn has managed to find, no doubt, Bryn, a very happy team.
Yeah, a very, very, very happy team manager, in fact, Eddie Hall here, and he should be happy too, because the driver's put in a bit of a stormer there. 1/1000th of a second, though.
Yeah, I think that's, as you said, the closest time ever, I think, and look, we've been chipping away at this all season, and now's our time to shine. We'll see how we get on tomorrow, but that's put us in a great position. Yeah, it certainly has. You had a podium so far this season as well, so it's been a decent start, but some points away from the top spot at the moment. What can you do ahead of tomorrow? I mean, I'm sure you'll be looking at it thinking you can win this one, but it's been close, isn't it, between yourself, Stuart Middleton, and Freddie Tomlinson, just a few garages up? Yeah, I think it's been close, and you know, there's great competition in the championship this year, but we'll do everything we can. We've put ourselves on the right foot for tomorrow's race, and let's see how we get on. Excellent stuff. Well done. All right, thank you.
Motorsport then taking pole position in GT4 just by that now famous 1,000th of a second. Cars are back on track tomorrow at 9:45 for the warm-up, and the race itself will be underway at 1 o'clock. We'll be on air a little bit before that with the build-up to the Intelligent Money British GT Championships 2-hour race around the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. So we'll be on air from about 9:40 for the warm-up, and as I say, well in advance of that 1 o'clock start for the race itself. say just the one race, but the 2-hour duration, and it promises to be quite a spectacle around the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. Right, join us for that tomorrow, because it will be a great 4th race within the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. But for now, from Donington, for Joe Osborne, Bryn Lucas and David Addison, it's goodbye.